Rain fell like the sky itself had forgotten how to stop. In the darkest corner of a forgotten town, a starving German shepherd curled around a foam box beneath a bridge, protecting what lay inside with the last heat of his fading body. But what the rescue team found inside that box wasn't just a baby. It was a secret, a miracle, and the beginning of a story that would unravel lies, reunite souls, and awaken a town that had long stopped believing in hope. So ask yourself, where were you when Echo stood guard? Because after this, you'll never forget him. Maple Hollow, Oregon, the kind of town that disappeared on maps when the rain came. And the rain had come hard. Sheets of water sliced across the rusted rooftops, streets turning into silver veins, puddles swallowing curbs whole. The clouds had been so thick for so long, the town seemed trapped in twilight, every light flickering against the weight of the sky. No footsteps echoed. No engines rumbled. Only the shrill cry of wind tangled with the hiss of rain, an angry symphony that played for no audience. Down by the forgotten edge of town, where a derelict freight warehouse slumped beside the railroad tracks, something moved. Slow. Heavy. Silent except for the soft drag of paws through mud. Echo emerged from behind a collapsing fence post, his frame more shadow than body now. He was a German shepherd, or what was left of one. Mud clung to the wet tufts of his golden-black coat like decay. His ribs jutted sharply, eyes sunken deep into a face that once brimmed with focus and strength. A faded scar curled beneath his left eye, a souvenir from a mission long buried in sand and silence. His hind leg trembled with every step, not from pain, he had grown used to that, but from weakness. Hunger gnawed at his stomach like fire. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Or was it 3? He couldn't tell anymore. His name had once meant something. Echo, a voice used to call, rich and warm. Let's go, partner. But now, the world had gone quiet. No voice called him home. No hands reached for him. Just rain, the howl of wind, and the memory of a name. He pressed forward toward an overturned trash bin, half sunken in the waterlogged earth. The stench didn't bother him. He'd learned that rot was sometimes the only thing still warm. With trembling nostrils, he sniffed, wet paper, broken plastic, sharp metal. No food. Nothing but the bitter scent of rust and filth. He turned away, stepping carefully between shards of broken glass. That's when he heard it. A sound, so faint it might have been imagined. But his ears perked, the muscle memory of his former training kicking in. Echo froze, eyes narrowing toward the wind. Then again, barely audible, a whimper. High-pitched. Fragile. It wasn't animal. He limped toward the highway underpass, where the bridge's edge dipped down into a thicket of blackened pine branches. There, half buried in the brush and leaves, lay something white. Styrofoam. A packing crate. Torn and soaked. And inside it, curled like something the storm had forgotten, was a baby. The girl couldn't have been more than a few days old. Her lips were pale, her eyelids fluttering weakly against the cold. A faded cloth clung to her tiny body, soaked through, offering no warmth. Her fists were balled tight, her skin bluish, her breath shallow and broken. Echo froze. Every instinct surged, every piece of training, every mission, every memory. He took one step forward, then another. Slowly, he lowered his nose to the box. The smell of milk, tears, and fear clung to the air like static. He nudged the corner, careful not to shake the baby. She whimpered again. Just that sound, so impossibly small, and it shattered whatever wall had kept Echo going. He didn't bark. Didn't cry out. Instead, he did what no one else had done. He stayed. He circled the box, lay down slowly, his soaked fur brushing against the cold styrofoam. His breath steamed in the air. The rain continued to fall, running down his back like river lines. He curled around the girl, his own body the only shield he had to offer. Time passed. Hours maybe. He didn't move. Every time a gust threatened to tip the box, he pressed himself tighter. When the water level rose, he shifted just enough to keep the baby above it. When his body shivered too hard, he clenched his muscles, willing himself to stay still. In the absence of voice, in the absence of light, there was only echo, and the child. On the other side of Maple Hollow, in a two-bedroom cottage at the foot of Pinewood Hill, Lena Worth stared out the window as rain slithered down the glass like veins of time. She was 38, lean-built, with tired eyes and a streak of silver hidden in her short dark hair. A nurse by profession, a mother by heart, a widow by fate. Her husband, a forest firefighter, had died in a blaze 5 years earlier. Since then, her world had narrowed to one purpose, her son. Noah sat cross-legged on the living room floor, colored pencils scattered around him like petals. He was 11 but spoke like he was 4, when he spoke at all. Autism had cocooned him since toddlerhood. Lena had learned to live in the silence he chose. She poured a cup of tea, hands trembling slightly, and turned to ask if he wanted toast. But he was drawing. Not the usual spirals or forests. Noah was sketching a dog. A large one, curled protectively around something small. Lena knelt beside him, curious. "Who's that?" she asked gently. Noah didn't answer at first. Then, almost inaudibly, he whispered, "He guards the light." Lena's breath caught. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. It was the first full sentence he had spoken in nearly a year. Outside, the wind howled louder. And far away, beneath the bridge, echo lay curled around a miracle that still breathed. Dawn came not with sunlight, but with a reluctant grayness that slowly peeled back the layers of night. The rain had thinned to a gentle drizzle, mist clinging to the treetops like smoke from forgotten fires. Maple Hollow breathed quietly, as if exhausted from the storm's wrath. Franklin Hayes stirred before his alarm. He always did on mornings after heavy rain. At 65, a retired railway worker with a frame built from decades of labor and coffee, he had a routine as firm as steel tracks. He pulled on his worn boots, slung a flashlight into his coat pocket, and stepped outside to walk the back trail behind the old station, just to make sure no debris blocked the lines. Just to keep busy. He didn't expect to find anything unusual. But as he reached the dip beneath the bridge, his beam caught a glint of white against dark earth. He slowed. There, curled in the mud like something dropped by God himself, was a dog, and a box. Franklin's breath caught. What in the holy? He knelt carefully, afraid to startle either figure. The dog was motionless at first glance, his fur matted and clinging to a dented foam crate. Then, barely, an ear twitched. Franklin leaned in. Inside the box, a baby whimpered. "Oh Lord," he breathed. "You've been out here all night?" He fumbled for his phone, calling 911 with shaking fingers. "This is Franklin Hayes out by Old Line 6 near the South Bridge. I've got a baby. And a dog. Both alive, but barely." By the time paramedics arrived, the road shimmered with mist. The dog didn't move as they lifted the crate, though his eyes flickered open briefly when the baby was taken. A paramedic named Jody knelt and pressed a gentle hand to his side. "Still breathing. But shallow. He's soaked through. We need a stretcher." "Should we separate them?" someone asked. "No," Jody replied firmly. "Leave them together until we get inside." The baby, later to be called Wren, was rushed to Maple Hollow Children's Clinic. Echo was taken to a small veterinary emergency center, where the veterinarian, Dr. Chloe Manners, shook her head in disbelief. "He's skeletal. Old scars. Left leg possibly dislocated. But no signs of aggression. Look at the way he watches the door." The name on his microchip, retrieved after several attempts, stunned them both. Sergeant Echo, Handler, Captain Jonah Greaves. Status: MIA. Meanwhile, at a small kitchen in Pinewood Hill, Lena Worth stared at the mug of tea in her hands. It had long gone cold. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about Noah's words. He guards the light. What did it mean? Noah had been drawing again. When Lena passed the living room, she paused. There on the page was another sketch. The same dog, curled tighter, eyes more sunken, but now with two forms above him, a spotlight from heaven and a little girl wrapped in stars. Noah, Lena whispered. Why do you keep drawing her? Noah looked up. She's not alone. Tears stung Lena's eyes. Did you dream this? He didn't answer. Instead, he slid another drawing across the floor, a railroad bridge. The same one just outside town. Her stomach tightened. That bridge. That area. That very location. A knock broke the silence. It was Mrs. Pierce from next door, breathless and wet from her umbrella. Did you see the news? A dog, some kind of war dog, they say, saved a baby out by the bridge. Happened last night. They're calling it a miracle. Lena's heart skipped. She turned to Noah. He had already drawn the next image, a hospital window. A baby sleeping. A dog lying beside her. Back at Maple Hollow General, Wren was wrapped in heated blankets, for lines gently flowing into her tiny wrist. Nurse Kylie, barely out of her 20s, hovered nervously by the bassinet. She's stable, the attending doctor said. But just barely. Severe hypothermia. Low glucose. Weak pulse. The dog likely saved her from going into full shutdown. Has anyone come forward? Kylie asked. No one. No missing child reports filed under her features. She may not even be local. And the dog? Still under observation. We're checking records now. At that moment, Lena arrived at the hospital. She wasn't sure why she came, just that something had pulled her here. An invisible tether. She gave a nurse her name, unsure what she'd say next. But when she passed the window of the NICU unit and saw the baby sleeping peacefully beside a stuffed animal, her breath hitched. She looked down at the newspaper headline someone had left on the counter. Unlikely guardian saves abandoned infant in Oregon storm. And below it, a photo, Echo curled tightly around the styrofoam box. It was the same as Noah's drawing. The next morning in Maple Hollow was quieter than usual. The rain had finally relented, replaced by a low fog that rolled over rooftops like a weary tide. Sunlight crept slowly through the mist, pale and cautious, as if unsure it belonged. Inside the Maple Hollow Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Chloe Manners sipped black coffee and reviewed the latest vitals on the screen. Echo was stable now, barely. The 4-drip in his leg pulsed slowly, and the bandages wrapped around his chest held firm against a reopened scar. He hadn't barked. Hadn't growled. Hadn't made a sound, except for the occasional soft whimper when he shifted in his sleep. Chloe studied the chip scanner again. Sergeant Echo, K-9 Division, Pacific Joint Rescue Unit. Handler, Captain Jonah Greaves. Status, presumed Kia. She frowned. Jonah Greaves. She remembered the name. It had made headlines almost 7 years ago. A covert rescue mission gone wrong in the Middle East. 2 helicopters down. Only 2 survivors pulled from the wreckage. The rest were presumed lost, including the dog. But somehow, here he was, alive in a sleepy Oregon town, guarding a baby he had no reason to know. Dr. Chloe called a friend from her vet school days who worked with the Department of Defense's K-9 registry. Run that handler ID for me, she asked quietly. Jonah Greaves. The response came 10 minutes later. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then. Jonah's MIA was never confirmed. But there's a detail that never went public. He was believed to have faked his disappearance to smuggle someone, or something, out. We don't know what. Only that he accessed Echo's decommissioning files days before vanishing. At Maple Hollow General, Nurse Kylie adjusted the sensors on baby Wren's blanket. She was resting now, a small 4 taped gently to her wrist. Her color had returned, a light peach glow under hospital lights. Her breathing was still faint, but steady. Beside her, someone had pinned a sketch. A drawing of a dog curled around a foam box. The lines were raw, but unmistakable. Kylie blinked. Who left this? Margaret, the social worker assigned to the case, picked it up. A boy named Noah Worth. His mother brought him by earlier. Apparently, he's the one who first said something about the baby and the dog, before anyone else knew. Kylie studied the drawing again. It's exactly how she was found. Wren stirred slightly, her hand twitching toward the image. The room seemed to hold its breath. Lena was pacing the edge of her kitchen, the corded phone to her ear. Her voice was calm, but her fingers shook. I'm just asking, she said. Was there ever an investigation into that pediatrician at St. Elmira's? Dr. Richard Voss. The voice on the other end sighed. You've asked this before, Lena. That was years ago. Things are different now. There was silence. Then, the files were sealed. No charges were filed. He left the hospital voluntarily. Moved to private practice in Portland. Lena hung up. Her eyes drifted toward the living room where Noah sat with a blank canvas in front of him. He was holding a red crayon, frozen in place. Noah? She asked softly. He didn't answer. She approached and knelt beside him. What are you drawing today? His hand moved, slow and deliberate. A face. Tired. Wrinkled. Glasses. He wrote beneath it, shakily, letter by letter. Voss. Lena's breath caught. Noah, how do you know that name? He looked at her, really looked, and said only, he took one. Then he pushed the paper away. At the sheriff's department, Deputy Calvin Reese had pulled the baby's fingerprints into the National Missing Children database. It was a long shot, most newborns weren't in the system, but he ran it anyway. An alert pinged less than 5 minutes later. Match, case hashtag 94 FDW 019. Infant female. Reported abducted, March 14. Birthplace, Seattle, Washington. Mother, private citizen. Name withheld. Case status, cold. Reese stared at the screen. Well, I'll be damned. He picked up the phone. Get me DHS, and then the feds. We've got a hit. Meanwhile, across town, Echo stirred in his sleep. His ears twitched, and his paws flexed. Dreams, broken shards of memory, flashed in his mind. A hand gripping his collar. The whir of a helicopter. Gunfire. A child's cry. A man's voice, Jonah's voice. Echo, run. Take her. Go. The images faded into mist as he opened his eyes. He tried to sit up, but pain laced down his spine like fire. Still, he forced himself upright. The nurse nearby blinked in surprise. He shouldn't be standing. But Echo wasn't standing for himself. He was standing because somewhere nearby, he sensed a heartbeat. Lena walked into the NICU later that afternoon with Noah, who held a drawing pressed to his chest. They had been invited by Margaret, the case worker, to help comfort the infant during recovery. When they reached the glass window, Noah stepped forward without hesitation. He approached the crib and placed the drawing on the edge. It showed a tree. And under it, a woman holding 2 children. Who's the second child? Margaret asked gently. Noah didn't look up. The one she forgot. And then he turned to Lena and whispered, we need to find her. The wind had picked up again by nightfall, sweeping across Maple Hollow with a strange urgency, as if the trees themselves had grown restless. The town seemed to hold its breath, waiting. At Maple Hollow General, baby Wren slept beneath soft lights, her breathing shallow but even. The hospital room was quiet, save for the faint beeping of monitors and the rhythmic whoosh of oxygen. A small security camera blinked red in the corner, its lens trained on the crib. Echo lay on a pad nearby, his fur still patchy with dried blood, his front paw wrapped tightly. He had refused to remain in the veterinary ward. Every time he was separated from Wren, he howled until brought back. So now, under special permission, he stayed curled in the room like a sentinel, head resting near the crib's base, ears twitching at the slightest shift in air. Dr. Chloe Manners had left a note on the door. Do not disturb. Military-trained K9 in protective mode. It wasn't just protocol. It was a warning, and a prayer. Across town, Lena parked her car outside the long-abandoned annex of St. Elmira's Women's Hospital. She stared at the weather-beaten entrance with a mix of dread and determination. The building had closed 5 years ago, after a financial scandal left its management exposed. But rumors lingered. Lena had given birth to Noah there. She remembered the wing where he was taken briefly after delivery, the wing where another infant had supposedly died during a power outage. Her second child. Only now, she wasn't sure that story was true. Noah's latest drawings had been troubling. One showed 2 cribs, side by side. One with a crying baby. One with a blank silhouette. And beneath it, he had written, "They took the quiet one." She stepped into the shadows of the annex, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark like a sword. Broken furniture lay in heaps. Old 4-poles leaned like skeletons. A rusted placard still read, "Neonatal Intensive Care, East Wing." She reached a file cabinet, pried it open. Dust burst into the air like smoke. And there, buried beneath outdated charts, was a file labeled simply, E. Worth, Day 2 Observation, Transfer Authorization Pending. Lena's hand trembled as she lifted the page. But before she could read, the sound of a door creaking deep within the corridor froze her breath. She wasn't alone. At the hospital, the hallway outside Wren's room grew unusually quiet. Echo's ears perked before any human noticed. Then came the soft squeak of rubber soles. The door opened a crack. A man stepped inside, white coat, hospital badge, clipboard in hand. He moved with clinical calm, barely glancing at the dog curled beside the crib. But Echo rose, muscles tensing. The man froze. "Easy, boy," he muttered. Echo didn't blink. Instead, his hackles rose. The man took another step toward the crib. Echo growled, a deep, ancient sound, low in his throat, vibrating the air like a fault line. Wren stirred. The man's eyes narrowed. "You're trained," he said, a hint of recognition flashing. "Too trained." Then Echo lunged. Not to attack, but to stand between the man and the baby. The door burst open. Nurse Kylie and a security guard rushed in. The man turned sharply, shoving his clipboard at them. "I was just checking vitals," he snapped. But he was already backing toward the door. The badge around his neck read Dr. Voss. Later that night, in the hospital administrator's office, Margaret, Deputy Reese, and Dr. Chloe reviewed the security footage. "He bypassed every clearance point," Reese muttered. "Used an old badge to override the NICU lock." Chloe frowned. "And he wasn't listed in our employee registry. Someone granted temporary access from a private consultant portal." "He was trying to take her again," Margaret said softly. "Even now." Reese slammed a fist on the table. "He's working with someone. This whole thing, Echo, Wren, even the Worths, it's connected." Back at the annex, Lena crouched behind an overturned gurney, breath held tight in her lungs. Footsteps echoed, 1, then 2. A flashlight beam crossed the floor just inches from her. She waited. When the light moved on, she crawled to the emergency exit and pushed the door open. Alarms didn't sound. The building had long since stopped caring. Outside, she clutched the file to her chest, heart pounding. On the final page was a faded signature, R. Havas. And scrawled in the margin, barely legible. Infant 2, vitals stable. Unmarked. Recommend transfer. Unmarked. Not deceased. The following morning, Echo was declared medically stable enough to remain permanently beside Ren during her recovery. Margaret filed the papers for long-term placement. They were a pair now. Inseparable. That same morning, Lena brought the file to the police station and handed it directly to Deputy Reese. He read it once. Then again. "You understand what this means?" he asked. Lena nodded. "I think my son had a twin," she said. "And he may still be out there." The sun rose cautiously over Maple Hollow, casting long amber fingers through the fog as if searching for something lost in the night. The streets were still wet, puddles shimmering like fragments of sky. But inside the town's heart, gears had begun to turn. Truth, long buried, was waking. At the Maple Hollow Sheriff's Office, Deputy Calvin Reese sat before a cluttered board. Strings, photos, and case files crisscrossed like veins in a living body. In the center, two faces, Ren and Echo. But the lines now stretched further, to Captain Jonah Greaves, marked MIA, and beneath him, a new arrival, Ethan Greaves. Reese had spent half the night reviewing Homeland Security files. Ethan had a sealed record, with only one line unredacted. Honorably discharged. Subject of concern in post-op disappearance, Pacific region. His last known location. Portland. Current address. Unknown. But his name had popped up twice, once in a flagged search from Dr. Voss's VPN. And again in a flight manifest heading toward Maple Hollow, dated 2 days prior. Reese circled the name with a red marker. "You're already here," he muttered. Meanwhile, inside the hospital nursery, Echo watched as Ren's tiny chest rose and fell beneath the soft blue blanket. Her fingers twitched occasionally, and once, she'd turned her head in her sleep, toward him. Since then, he hadn't moved more than an inch. A nurse entered with a tray. Echo's ears flicked up. His body shifted slightly, positioning himself between the crib and the door. But when he saw the nurse's eyes, soft, tear-streaked, he eased. She bent to the crib and whispered, "You don't even know what you saved, do you?" But Echo did know. He didn't remember everything, but he remembered her. Not Ren exactly, but the scent of a baby carried through gunfire and dust. The last thing Captain Jonah had whispered. "Take her to where they won't follow. Take her to the trees." Across town, Lena sat on the porch steps with Noah beside her. The file she'd taken from the St. Elmira annex sat open between them. The final page still shook in her hand. "Noah," she asked softly, "do you remember the day you were born?" He didn't respond. "Or, someone else there? Another baby?" Still silence. She was about to sigh when he said, quietly, "He doesn't remember either." Lena turned to him, startled. "Who?" Noah picked up a pencil and began to draw. First, a boy. Same age. Same face. But with a dark birthmark over his left shoulder. Then, a van. A hospital bracelet. And a man with dark hair and a long scar behind his ear. When he finished, he simply wrote. "He's near." At the same moment, a black SUV rolled down a gravel road just outside of Maple Hollow. Inside sat Ethan Greaves, his fingers tapping against the steering wheel. His hair was shorter than Jonah's had been, his eyes paler, but the resemblance was unmistakable. He wore a charcoal coat over a pressed shirt. Neat. Controlled. Efficient. Next to him lay a dossier. Inside, photos of Ren in the hospital, screenshots of Echo, and a file marked. Project Ash Haven, removal protocol, failed. Ethan stared at the images without blinking. "You're still alive," he murmured. "You survived the crash. And the dog brought her back." He closed the file and looked up at the town. "Then we start again." Later that evening, Margaret, the social worker, gathered with Lena, Deputy Reese, and Dr. Chloe in the hospital conference room. They laid everything on the table: Ren's identity match, Lena's recovered file, Voss's attempted infiltration, and Noah's drawings, now being taken more seriously than anyone once thought. "We need to know how deep this goes," Reese said. "And we need to know who else is involved." Margaret pointed to the last photo from the hospital surveillance footage, the man Echo had blocked. "That's Voss. And he's not working alone." Reese nodded grimly. "Then we bait the trap." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by Noah's bed as he sketched, his hand moving faster now, more confident. She noticed something strange: he kept drawing the same symbol in the corners of every page. 3 circles inside a triangle. "What's that mean, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Noah looked at her, then at the window. "It's the place." "The place?" He nodded. "Where they keep the forgotten ones." Back at the hospital, Echo jolted upright from a restless sleep. The room was still. Too still. He sniffed the air, something was wrong. He stood, ears raised. Then came a soft, almost imperceptible click, the sound of a lock disengaging. Echo turned. The hallway beyond the door was dark. A figure moved, slow and shadowed. But this time, Echo didn't wait. With a growl that shook the walls, he charged, not to attack, but to warn. Security lights burst on. The figure froze. And as officers poured into the corridor, guns drawn, the man lifted his hands. "Name?" Reese barked. The man smiled faintly. "Ethan Greaves. I believe you have something of mine." Rain returned to Maple Hollow on the morning of Ethan Greaves's confession, not a storm, but a steady, soft rain, as if the sky itself exhaled. It glazed the pine trees, glossed the windows of the sheriff's station, and slid silently down the hospital's glass like tears the world forgot to cry. Inside the interview room, Ethan sat with wrists cuffed to the table. His expression was calm, too calm. Across from him, Deputy Calvin Reese flipped through the thickening case file. "You accessed child trafficking networks under the name Ash Haven," Reese said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I accessed the silence. I didn't build the system. I just knew how to find what others threw away." "And what was Ren to you?" "Collateral. A gift. A mistake." Reese tightened his jaw. "She's Jonah's daughter, isn't she?" Ethan smirked. He thought he could vanish with her. Thought Echo would keep them safe. But helicopters fall. Dogs break. People lose hope. He leaned in, his voice colder now. "But that dog didn't break, did he?" In the hospital recovery room, Ren lay sleeping, pink-cheeked and breathing steadily. Her vitals were strong now. She was no longer just surviving. She was living. Echo remained at her side, his head resting beside her small fingers, one ear always turned toward the door. Since Ethan's arrest, the hospital had assigned a guard to the hallway, but Echo didn't care. He trusted no one but her. Nurse Kylie brought in the breakfast tray and smiled. "Morning, hero." Echo blinked slowly, but didn't move. "You know it's over now, don't you?" she whispered. Echo closed his eyes, but not in sleep. In peace. At the Worth home, Lena paced the living room while Noah sketched furiously at the dining table. For the first time, his strokes were filled with light. Trees with golden leaves. Children running. A house with windows wide open. But it was the center drawing that held her. A boy, same as Noah, but with a dimple on the opposite cheek and a small mole over the collarbone. "Is this him?" Lena asked softly. Noah nodded. His name's Eli. She swallowed. And where is he now? Noah turned to a fresh page. With slow care, he drew a building, a barn. A large tree. And beside it, 3 small cottages, each with a number. He pointed to the one marked 2. Deputy Reese drove Lena and a child recovery team north toward the forest edge that bordered the county line. There, camouflaged among the trees and forgotten roads, was the location from Noah's drawing, a secluded property long thought abandoned. Inside Cottage 2, they found Eli. 11 years old. Quiet. Observant. With the same eyes as Noah. His voice was soft when they asked for his name. They called me 9, he said. But I think, my name is something else. When Lena stepped inside and whispered, Eli. The boy turned. And in his face, she saw every missing year. Every heartbeat. Every silence she'd lived through without knowing why. He didn't run into her arms. Not yet. He simply walked over, placed his hand in hers, and asked, Do you know my mom? I do now, she said, tears falling freely. Days passed. The Maple Hollow Courthouse approved a legal name change for Wren, Willow Greaves, daughter of the late Jonah Greaves. Though her biological roots were confirmed, the court recognized Margaret Lewis, the woman who first carried her into safety, as her legal guardian. Echo was granted full certification by the state as a Trauma Therapy and Protection K-9, along with the honorary title. Echo the Guardian, Badge 117, retired with distinction. He received it wearing a red vest with silver trim, and for the first time, he wagged his tail. A week later, a festival bloomed in Maple Hollow's town square. Tables lined the sidewalks with pies and quilts. Children played under string lights. In the center of it all stood a wooden stage, where Margaret held Willow in her arms, and Lena held hands with both Noah and Eli. Deputy Reese stepped forward and called a name that echoed across the crowd. Echo. The German shepherd stepped onto the stage, not stiffly, not painfully, but with the calm strength of one who knew exactly where he belonged. His scars shimmered beneath his fur. His eyes scanned the crowd, not for danger, but for recognition. Willow stepped forward. She knelt, placed a daisy crown on his head, and whispered. My Echo. He licked her cheek once, then lay at her feet. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was soft. Reverent. Like the closing of a sacred book. At sunset, Lena stood beneath the oak tree in her backyard. Noah and Eli played nearby, their laughter mingling in the wind. She held the last drawing Noah had made, Echo sleeping beneath a tree, surrounded by 4 children and one soft light above him. When she turned, she saw Echo lying on the porch, his head resting on Willow's lap, her tiny fingers stroking his ears as she hummed. Is he tired? Lena asked gently. Willow nodded. He says he wants to rest now. Just for a little. That night, under a quilt of stars, Echo closed his eyes beside Willow's crib one last time. And never opened them again. But he didn't leave them empty. He left them with stillness. With safety. With echoes that would never fade. Sometimes the most broken among us carry the greatest strength. Echo had no words, no home, and no voice left, but his actions spoke a truth louder than any scream, that love does not require a reason, that loyalty is not earned but given freely, and that even in a world scarred by cruelty, healing is possible. Not because we forget the pain, but because we choose to protect something anyway. And in that choice, we become heroes.